is another case, compare who is in a better position and who is in a worse position. This is very important because this will help us distribute in a more careful and a more equal way the social resources. So if we detect the risk factors to evaluate between one individual and the other, then we will know who is more in need of a certain service. And if we don't use a criteria, then we will not be able to do so. It is important in a context in which we are living in a world with very limited resources to have the capacity of really try to equally provide everybody with the services that they are needing. And another thing which is very important, the scale also helps us eliminate involvement in areas in which no problem is detected. Therefore, we do not have to intervene in those areas in which there is no problem. And in the issue or the area of the mental illness, there's a risk that, you know, we are nobody to say when there is a suffering, a pathology. You know, we don't want to really intrude to a certain point in people's private life and tell them how they must live or how must they do things. You know, that's their personal right. So really eliminate those areas in which no problem is detected and do not intrude in the individual's life. You do not try to be, you know, that God trying to control the life of the individual. And the scale has also been used in different contexts with immigrants when they are arriving at new countries, but we are also using this scale with individuals who have not immigrated yet and are still in their land of origin to see if it will be to their advantage to migrate or not, because they will face difficulties, and so they are able to evaluate if they are able to overcome. And immigrants who have gone back to their land of origin, people that are immigrants from Peru and were in Spain, and now they go back to their land of origin, and how it's affected them psychologically, meaning the scale not only helps us study the immigrant who has immigrated, but also study that one who immigrated and now is back in their place or land of origin and what they face. And like we said yesterday, we have to have a global perspective. We have to understand that today's world, really, we have to look for global answers to a global problem, not only here in this country, but also really work collaboratively with the other countries. So very well, as I've explained, what are the objectives and the different elements and factors that the scale points out. The scale is based in certain theories that we have to take in consideration, so that it's very important to take in consideration if we are taking a picture, you know, we have to make sure that the camera is in good functioning well. We have to have an instrument that helps us analyze in a high quality, in a way that we have the maximum guarantees. So I will briefly say that we have to be very rigorous and thorough in this analysis, the epistemological level and the theoretical level. Why that theory, and if that theory has a scientific level, and if not, we might be measuring an area without the proper instruments. Very well. So the scale is really a model that structures information, like we've mentioned, and the models really are similar representations of objects, of processes, or formal representations. And these models are similar to the rules of correspondence between the theoretical level and the praxis level, the reality level of such magnitude that cannot be compared. So when working with models, we can theorize and have so many theories, but it's hard to prove these. And you can't measure reality because there's so many variables. So the model is really in between for the investigation. The models help overcome the excessive gap between the level of the theories and that of the facts. The theories are abstract conceptualizations that are difficult to compare with reality, and the models are schematizations of aspects of theory closest to the epimerical model and the model concept. For example, a model that is more the reality of the abstract and reality. For example, take a house as an example. It's huge, has a lot of bedrooms, and the level of theory that is in between from facts or reality. So we can say that it works or functions more as a model or concept used in the architecture. It involves a mock-up mapper between theory and reality or facts. Therefore, it's very important to really have good theories. And it would be quite lengthy to go into detail explaining this, but I will say, like we will comment later on, the analysis that we do from the scales point of view can only be valid if there is a good theory behind it. Therefore, we have to be very thorough. How are we measuring it? If we fail, then we will not be successful. Therefore, we really have to observe. Observing reality is not a mere objective transcription of events. Reality is not directly observed. We have to have in mind the importance of theory. We really can't we cannot really observe reality in a more thorough or detailed way. In my book, I've explained it in a more thorough way. If you are interested, please speak with Jose. So therefore, our theories on which the scale is based are several theories which have a very important level. The psychoanalytical theory of the grief, there are certain aspects that are more complex, but the psychoanalytical theory is one of the most applicable theories and have given us good results in the clinical work and the cognitive theory of stress, the social psychiatry and psychology, and also the evolutionary psychiatry and psychology, meaning we will try to have a series of powerful tools, very well structured, so we're able to perform this job, this work. It's lengthy to explain all of this, but I think I'd like to explain this. Otherwise, we will not have the potential to continue on with the evaluating method. Therefore, I think it's very important that we take a few minutes to analyze this. Now, if we go back after this talk on these different factors, we go back to the scale and how it works.
So then we are going to talk about the 7 griefs that we have talked about previously. So you mix depressive aspects. There's grief for what was left behind, for what you left in your native country. On the other side, in immigration, there's anxiety, confusion in respect to what's coming up ahead that we cannot control, that we don't know very well. And the answers could be anxiety, feelings of this type, where you're confused, anguished. These are the basic elements when it comes to the level of psychology. As an example, because of the language, you would have to know the loss or the contact with the native language, the suffering. But the woman might not know the language. And the effort would be to learn the language, to understand, to be aware of confused situations. We have to take this into account when the scale is being analyzed. The second pillar of the scale, we saw the griefs. The second pillar would be the intensity of the griefs. And here, like we talked about previously, we distinguish the simple grief. It's the one that we live in one way, and then there's the complicated one, the simple and the complicated one. There are ways, but with straight effort, you can overcome this. When the problem is just really bad that you're not able to get out of it, then you go into crisis. As an example, the grief for family and immigration, the simple grief, a young boy or an adult, he could go and come back to see his family, doesn't have kids, doesn't have sick parents. It's a vital change that has no risks, a psychological risk. The complicated grief is when you have parents that are sick, little ones. You could go, but it's hard and there's a lot of difficulties. But then it becomes hard because you can't go back. You don't have your documentation. There could be the death of a father and you can't go back to the funeral. All this. So the third pillar that comes in the scale, these two variables that are the ones that we are going to see fundamentally, the vulnerability and the stressors. That is how we refer to them. And how do we answer to these? We understand by vulnerability all of the limitations that the immigrant has, and that these suppose a risk for his isolation. Nobody is perfect. We all have struggles, difficulties, limitations, human limitations. Some have more and some have less. Vulnerability will measure the grade on that struggle. So the immigrant has vulnerability from the beginning when he starts this migration. It is before migration that we try to understand or measure the vulnerability. When the migration closes the door, takes his luggage and takes off, everything that he was before will be vulnerable. If he was sick from the heart, or he's limping, or if he's blind, all these things are needed to be successful in the country where he is going to. We evaluate vulnerability independently, each one of the 7 griefs. We can't correlate them where we believe that there are situations that are different. Just as you see at the very bottom, we distinguish between simple vulnerability, complicated vulnerability, and extreme vulnerability. Within the same criteria, we apply grief, we apply vulnerability. What is vulnerability? Simple limitations, nobody's Superman. There's some things. The complicated one is when the problems that we have are very important, and we are going to have hardship in migration. Somebody who's sick from the heart, that migrates with total deafness. This is all very important. But if he has the means, if he has the resources, he could elaborate on that. That would be the complicated vulnerability. This would be a person that he doesn't know anything, or with a disability of walking. There are extreme things that hinder the power of having success of the projects up ahead. So there's vulnerability, the simple one, and then the complicated one. Logically, we have indicators to measure with all detail when we talk about simple, and that's why we put examples. This all has to have small readings. What are stressors?